Hi, everybody. For some reason, my video is not working. So you're not going to get to see me today, which is probably better for all of you. But I am here, and we'll give folks another couple minutes, and then we'll get started. All right. Looks like we got a pretty good critical mass here in our the end of our popcorn bag popping when things start to slow down a little bit. So we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our May Launch Committee Pathways Initiative stakeholder meeting. My camera's not working, so you're not going to get me on video today because that's the kind of day it's been. But we are excited to share some pretty good progress with everyone today. We want to talk through the details of our phase 3 budget, and then discuss our proposal for the seating of an initial board. This is an item that we're going to be taking feedback on, and look forward to getting some thoughts and ideas around what we've put together. I do want to start just to sort of address an elephant in the room. We are not going to be discussing the legislation today. The Launch Committee, as we've mentioned in the past, is not engaged in any sort of lobbying work. If you have questions about the latest with SB 540 in California, you can send me a note and I'm happy to connect you with folks who are working on that on the ground. But we're not going to talk about that during this meeting. So I just wanted to hit that from the get-go. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in on our phase 3 budget discussion, and I'm going to pass it over to Jim Shetler, hoping that Jim is on to
I
talk
am
through.
on. Good morning, everybody, and good morning, Kathleen.
Good.
Appreciate everybody being here today. Wanted to do an overview for the stakeholder community on what we're looking at for a phase 3 budget, going from now to the formation of a fully functioning tariff-funded RO with oversight on the markets. We have broken down the budget into 3 subphases, what we call preparation, formation, and implementation. And if you had a chance to look at the budget, it goes through and outlines some of the high-level activities that will be going on and support that will be provided throughout these phases. That includes project management, it includes legal services where necessary, continue to use global impact to be our accounting function, and other allowances. We are looking at a 3-year ramp up. I know that seemed like a long time. It did to us as when we were laying this out. But part of that is dealing with the legislation process in California, which will take us through most of this year. And we want to get a board seated, and we'll talk about that a little more. And then some staff associated with that in order to have an independent counterparty to be working with the ISO on development of tariff language and services agreements. And as you will remember, our recommendation is a 7-member board. We are planning on having starting with 5 during this initial phase and then planning on by the time we go live, January 1st, 28, being at a full 7. Next slide, please. So looking at the preparation phase, we're defining that as January of this year through the end of October. And the key trigger for that is by the end of October, we will know whether we have approved legislation that will allow us to implement the RO from the California perspective. And I'm not going to go through and talk about every activity, but the main effort we have right now is getting our incorporation documents done, finalizing this budget, developing some high level parameters around what the service agreement might look like, and getting ourselves ready as stakeholders to form a nominating committee. We've estimated our needs for this at just a little over $250,000 from the first of this year through end of October. The good news is we have sufficient funds in the account to cover that through the end of October. So we're not needing to have any additional funding to get us through there. Next slide, please. That's just the formation activities. And what we're looking at is, assuming we do have approved legislation come November 1st, we would gear up to start filing the incorporation documents, get a nominating committee stood up, hire a placement firm to help us with the selection of board members, as well as identifying candidates for an executive director and general counsel, and continuing to start developing that term sheet. We're estimating that phase is going to be from the 1st of November through the end of September of 26, a little over $1 million. A lot of that is associated with hiring a placement firm and compensation when we bring board members and staff on. Next slide, please. And then the implementation phase, we're looking at October 1st through the end of December. This would be the final drafting and development of the tariff and service agreement language. It allows for both the ISO and the RO to have an extensive stakeholder process in reviewing that. It also starts the initial development of hiring for support staff and would be finalizing the stakeholder process. That a little over a year and a quarter, year and a half, is about $5 million. Next slide, please. So putting that all together, that totals up to a little over $6.5 million. We are assuming that we would need a contingency, so we're identifying a 10% contingency, which puts that at about $7.2 million. So with that, maybe I'll stop there, see if there's any questions.
Thanks, Jim.
Maybe I will. Probably one of the questions, if you don't have it, I know I do, is where's the money going to come from? Thought I'd maybe touch on that. As you will remember, we did file for a DOE grant. We did get initial indications late last year that we were awarded a grant. I think as everybody is probably not surprised, the communications with DOE has been rather sparse since January 20th. We are still looking to try to engage to see if we can get a DOE grant, but we're not assuming that that will be the case. So we know we will have to reach out to the stakeholder community in the various forums and seek donations to support this. I'll just let you know, I've been starting some initial dialogue with the utilities that have indicated support for EDAM, and not suggesting the utilities would support all of the 7.2 million, but at least have started dialogue around how we might support that. So with that, questions? I think I get to turn it back to you, Kathleen.
Well, thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. If anybody has additional questions as we go, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat or raise your hand. So with that, we'll talk through our initial board seating proposal. And as Jim mentioned, part of the reason for the numbers in the budget um, have to do with sort of um, the way we put together this recommendation of the timing and size of the initial board. So after a lot of discussion, the proposal that we are bringing forward for stakeholder input is that we would seat an initial permanent board in July of 2026. And I'll just pause for a second to note that at I think 2 meetings ago in our March meeting, we talked about the formation board. And I want to make sure that we distinguish that versus this. So just as a reminder, the formation board, um, the the proposal that the launch committee has adopted is that when we file our application for nonprofit status in our initial incorporation documents, for the regional organization, likely in January of 2026, we had to have names of board members. And so at that point, um, we decided that we would use the formation committee as those initial board members, and that would not change anything, any of the authority or duties of the launch committee or the formation committee. It would really just primarily be for the purposes of those applications. And so this initial board um, is envisioned to get folks in place that meet that level of independence that we envisioned for the permanent structure of the regional organization. Because at that point, the regional organization will start working on some of the more substantive issues. And you can see on the slide, negotiating with the CAISO around necessary tariff changes to implement this full step two proposal, as well as the service agreement with the CAISO, so that we've got an independent governance structure in place as we start going down those more substantive tasks. So just wanted to make sure we had that kind of context. So our proposal is that we aim to seat an initial permanent board in July, but recognizing that this is the first time we're going through this process, and that there is a lot in it, giving ourselves a little bit of wiggle room, but with the goal of having a board seated no later than January of 2027. To get to a July 2026 board date, we'll have to initiate our nominating committee process no later than January of next year. We are proposing that this initial board would have five of the 7 members that we had recommended in our final proposal, and that we would then seat those last 2 folks once we've got the tariff changes approved by FERC and funding for the RO is in place through the tariff. Recognizing that there are a lot of really good folks out there, but we have set a pretty high bar for independence. If we don't have a full, highly qualified set of 5 candidates for the initial board, we will continue to recruit and look for the level of candidate that we really need for this initial board. I've talked a little bit about the first bullet here on the duties, but I think the second one is equally as important. This board would not yet have any authority over the markets because that authority change does not happen until FERC approves the tariff change. and that that governance authority is officially shifted over to the new regional organization from the CAISO. Next slide, please. Diving a little bit deeper into the proposal, these 5 members we would just have them all serve until the RO tariff is approved and implemented, and that this initial round of service would not count against the term limits. Our recommendation at this point for term limits are that we have uh, 3 3-year terms. And so again, even, so folks that sit on this initial board, the time frame, whether it's a year and a half or 2 years, however long it takes us to get FERC approval over the tariff and then that funding implemented, um, that amount of time would not count against the terms for the RO board. Sorry, hang on one second. I have to shut my door. I have chaos happening in my house. Okay, sorry. So we also, in our final proposal, had put out an initial set of staggered terms so that we don't have all of the board members turning over at the same time as we move forward. So our proposal is when we have the tariff approved, sort of thinking about that as day one of the official RO, and we have a full 7-member board. 2 of those seats would be 1-year terms, 2 of those seats would be 2-year terms, and 3 of the seats would be full 3-year terms. And we would probably do that in a sort of randomized way. We had quite a bit of discussion about what happens if we've got people who are, if you've got somebody in place in July of 2026 and then they serve, well more than 9 years. At that point, is that too long? Should we, do we need to be mitigating against, having someone in the place for too long? And we decided that because the nominating committee process is designed to really evaluate all of the potential candidates for any either reappointment or open board seat, that there is a process built into this as we move forward for the nominating committee and then ultimately the RO board to determine whether or not that person is still the right fit for this role, and whether the qualifications continue to be met. Especially in these early days when we're in the sort of initial implementation of this new organization, potentially the skill sets and the focus and the experience that we need for this phase of the organization may differ from the longer term oversight of the markets as once the RO is fully off the ground with its full authority. The other thing, with some of the input that we got was that the governing body, outgoing governing body member John Prescott has actually been the first governing body member who has reached the term limit. So it is, so often, this is 9 years is a long time. So, we will be fortunate to be able to keep people for those 3 terms. So just sort of recognizing what the reality is that we're facing and making sure that we have really qualified independent folks sitting in these positions. Next slide, please. So again, as reflected in the budget, this initial board will create a pretty significant increase in our budget starting in July. We decided after a lot of discussion that we did not think that the budget should be a limiting factor for the important role that this independent body will play as we move forward. So we decided that we would prioritize having some of these independent board members in place earlier so that there really is that separation and independence for the negotiations with the CAISO, and that was worth the effort and investment to try to get the funding to make that happen rather than um, saying this is too expensive of an option. We'll just wait for later. We did also have quite a few conversations about the existing WEM governing body, and with input from some of those members, and even the CAISO Board of Governors. We determined that while any of the governing body members are able and eligible to apply to serve on the RO board, um, the CAISO Board of Governors and the WEM governing body have expressed that it is important to both of those bodies that the governing body maintain a full 5-member group until the RO tariff is approved and this authority gets shifted over. There's a lot that is happening with the EIM and EDAM over the course of the next couple of years. So having that full suite um, of independent members serving on the governing body for that full time was really important to ensure that the oversight and authority for those for the implementation phase of EDAM in particular is maintained. If governing bodies are interested in serving on the RO board, though, before we get to the shift over of authority, the governing body will have to replace those folks. So we're not going to say they can't apply, but they certainly can't serve on both. And the goal is to have a full suite of members both on the governing body and on the RO board initially. They would be, I think what our recommendation was in the final proposal was that governing body members would sort of skip over the initial, application phase but would still have to compete against other interested and qualified candidates and have the full vetting against the criteria that we've put together for the RO board. So we're not reserving any seats for governing body members, but certainly their experience would be an asset for the RO board if they are interested ultimately. Next slide, please. So at this point, we are happy to take questions here now on this proposal. We're going to have a 2-week comment period for folks to provide written comments that will go until June. I think that's a full 2 weeks now that I'm looking at it. What is 2 weeks from today? So June 13th. Sorry, we'll have to correct that. June 13th, we'll have comments due on this proposal. Same format as we've done to date. And then at our June stakeholder meeting, we'll go over the feedback that we've received through comments, and we have some additional updates to provide. Jim, I saw you come off. Did you want to jump in and add anything here?
Just if we're getting ready for questions, I noted there was a question in the chat and having to do with the amount of the grant, and it was a $900,000 grant that we applied for, were initially approved for.
Thank you. All right, we've got another question here. Considering there are staggered terms for the seats, how would they be distributed to the board members? Would the later seated 2 members get the 3-year term seats because they weren't on the initial board? Will that be up to the RO board to decide when it comes up? Jim, do you want to take that?
Sure. Normally we do it, our recommendation is to be done by lot, if you will, random draw. But at the end of the day, it probably will be up to the board as to how they want to do that random selection. But we're not trying to prescribe who might get what seats.
Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in the initial EIM governing body, we did ask when we were seating the first board, because we did a similar approach on the staggered, we did ask if anybody had interest in 1, 2, or 3, or they were just open. And we did have some folks that wanted to actually be considered for the shorter term. So that's obviously the other thing you can do.
Thanks, Randy. Any other questions about the initial board proposal at this point? Will there be a prescribed breakdown of the sectors that are represented on the board? There are not sectors represented on the board. We have a set of qualifications and experience that we identified would be really important for board members to bring to the table that are in the final proposal. Happy to share that around as well. But this is not, the board is not designed to have sector representatives on it. The nominating committee that will select that will put together the initial slate of board members for approval will have sector representation. So, and that will be the 9 sectors that we had in our final proposal, plus a member from the BOSSR and a member from the launch committee. Jim, am I missing anything on that?
No, that's correct. That's correct for the initial, excuse me, the initial seating. Long term, there'll be a rep from the board also rather than a rep from the launch committee.
Right. Any other questions on this proposal? All right. So again, we'll have our next stakeholder meeting at the end of June, where we will kind of go through the feedback that we get on comments. We'll have some additional information on the nominating committee process to share with folks, as well as sort of progress that we're making on getting some of the sectors up and off the ground. That is something that is going to be really important as we look to be able to initiate the nominating committee process in January. We're going to need all of those sectors to be able to have a representative on the nominating committee, so that we do have that diverse perspective going into the selection of the initial RO board members. And then planning to be able to bring some of our draft corporate documents to stakeholders at our July meeting. So we'll present those and then have, again, another opportunity for written comment. Next slide, please. So a couple of opportunities for engagement. Our next meeting, as I mentioned at the end of June, is June 27th. Also wanted to flag the Regional Issues Forum is hosting their next meeting on June 17th in Reno. This is particularly relevant because they've been having some discussions about how and whether they should incorporate some of the final proposal stakeholder process recommendations into their own structure. So they've solicited some feedback on that. So more discussion about what that looks like will happen at the RIF's upcoming meeting on the 17th. And then, as a reminder, all of our information and materials, including this slide deck, will be posted on the landing page for the Pathways Initiative on the WEEB website. And with that, any final questions, any additional comments from anyone that I missed? All right, fabulous. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you have a fantastic weekend and look forward to getting your feedback on the initial board proposal. Thanks, everyone.